You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. Hi everyone, this is your host, Daniel Lee here, and I wanted to give you some background on the actual podcast. So, I really like asking people what they do, and I've had jobs as a public accountant, a management consultant, and lately as a public equities investor. And in getting these roles, I had to speak to a lot of people who were already doing what I wanted to do. And it turned out that what the media and industry stereotypes say about the role is not at all accurate to what you actually do. And this was not to mention that most assumptions people said about a certain individual's journey into that career field was also wrong. This was because it's never as linear as people think it is. It's never as simple as you do A, then you go to B, and then you will get to do C. It's actually much more complicated than that, and that's what I realized after having spoken to over 80 different people to learn about what they did. And something I found out was that a lot of my friends had not learned this yet. Some eventually would because they have already started reaching out to people to actually learn about what they did. But I also knew that many wouldn't because cold calling people really frightened them, and that's completely understandable. It still scares me too. But I also am always extremely curious about what other people do, and I love hearing about their stories. So I figured maybe I can help them out with this podcast and just document what I would normally be talking about with other people. And so that's what this podcast is about. It's me finding people with career journeys that I find interesting, and or they have roles that I would like to learn more about. And so I really do hope that I can add value to you in that sense as I go about selfishly using this podcast to learn more about other people and fulfill my own curiosity. So yeah, there you have it. And so for today, our guest will be Ian Weng. Ian is a good old friend of mine that I knew since university, and he's currently the operations and logistics manager at UberEats, and he will be the marketing lead for the Vancouver operation. And this was a very fascinating conversation. I knew Ian for multiple years, but I had no idea about the kind of journey he went through with his first startup after he had left KPMG. And it was really fascinating to hear about how he ended up meeting his co-founder after he visited his friends who were doing PhDs in MIT and Harvard, and they connected him to what would be his co-founders for his startup. And then it turned out that his career background with eatery startup with previous roles at KPMG in transportation and logistics would actually be a great match for UberEats, which is a food delivery company. So that was a very fascinating story, and I really do hope that you guys get a lot of benefit out of his journey as an auditor all the way through navigating to different realms and finally going into his role at the tech world. All right. Thanks, Ian, for joining me for this podcast interview. So, everyone, we're joined by Ian Weng. He is a
market lead for Vancouver at UberEats, and he's currently in the Toronto office. So Ian, just to give Ian's background for those who don't know, we go way back together in terms of we both went to the University of Waterloo, went to the accounting program there. Then we both started careers at KPMG and Audit. And one thing that I think takes it even further back together is that we both, I think, grew up in Vancouver prior to university. So, taking us kind of back there, how would you describe your childhood? Did it begin in Vancouver?
No, well, first of all, thanks for having me on this podcast, Daniel. I was born in Beijing, actually, and I moved to Vancouver when I was very young, at the age of 6. So I grew up in Vancouver, Vancouver proper for elementary school, and Burnaby later for high school. So yeah, most of my childhood spent in British Columbia. I thought it was, great place to grow up. The West Coast, best coast, right?
Yeah.
In terms of childhood, I would say, grew up as a pretty intellectually curious kid. Loved to just explore, read, build things. I remember being super young and just collecting random materials, like whether it's wood, cardboard, or whatever, and just finding time putting things together, building cars or castles or something like that. Just sort of a builder from a young age.
Okay, so given that. What did you want to be when you were young? Like when you go to school and stuff, the teachers ask, hey, what do you want to be? And like you draw sketches of what you want to be growing up. What ideas did you have then?
Yeah, honestly, didn't have a good sense of what I wanted to be. I think in school, mostly sort of focus on the sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, took them all. I found physics super, super interesting. I remember going to like physics Olympics and having a blast there. Really, we built a submarine that could submerge below water, pick up things from the bottom of the bottom surface, and then bring it back up top. So I had a lot of fun in those fields. And in terms of career into like accounting and finance, that was really later on, like grade 11, grade 12, where I made that decision.
Yeah, I think given that kind of past, like if when I look at your LinkedIn profile, for example, the profile kind of goes. You joined Audit. After Audit, you did some financial advisory. So we got that accounting finance mix, and then there's like a bit of a switch there. Where now I see that you started a food startup company, and then now you're at Uber.
Yeah.
So, like, how did that kind of transition happen for you? For like, you were this kid that loved building and stuff. Why go into accounting?
So honestly, it was a case competition. I think I did in grade 11 or 12. I can't remember which year. We did the CMA came to our high school and said, "Hey, we're holding a case competition. Would anyone like to join?" So myself and a couple of my friends. So we decided to join. The question was. I can't remember exactly what the question was, but it was around Facebook. Yeah. And you know what it was? It was I think the question was, should Facebook go through an IPO? And this is pre-Facebook IPO, right? And the CMA pillars at that time was strategy, management, and accounting, right? So we really bought into that, and we went to the case competition. I think we won first or second place, something like that. And we thought, man, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Right? Like we. Presenting on whether Facebook should go through an IPO or not, and that really changed our sort of like my mindset from like sciences to business. I thought this is a really cool field, and the topics that we discuss here is really, really interesting, right? And I think that's basically how I chose my university major.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
I'm not sure if that really materializes in what a CMA actually does, but that's definitely at least what the case competition showcased.
Yeah, I think, I think now, for some of the listeners that wouldn't know, the CMA is one of the accounting designation bodies, but they don't exist anymore. I guess We've all kind of merged into the whole CPA body now. There's like the legacy people that remain. Okay, so you had this ideal thought, and definitely I think from our audit days, I can attest that we rarely do strategy overviews on potential IPOs.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so now you go to Audit, you spend all your co-op terms there, and I think you stayed until like you were a senior, and then you made the switch. So take me through that process. Like, what was that stuff? Like, why did you go into infrastructure? Was that tying back to like the building roots now, where you wanted to go back to building things?
I wish. I don't think it was that structure in terms of thinking, but I think a few years in audit. I left as a senior. While during sort of my auditing days, I was in the financial institutions group, so focused on like sort of banks, funds, stock exchanges, and things like that. I thought that whole sort of background gave me a lot of good understanding of how businesses work, right? Studying accounting, the language of business, right? Getting a really strong fundamental understanding of that. And being a senior there had sort of given me the opportunity to lead teams as well, right? Because for these bank teams, they're fairly large. So sort of people management skills there. After a few years of that, I really wanted to, move away from. I knew I didn't want to be a partner at an accounting firm, right? So, so I mean, if we stayed in audit, that's sort of the path that you're pursuing, right?
Yep.
So, I wanted to branch out a little bit, and I think the path of least resistance at that time, in terms of how do we move closer to the consulting or finance world, is to transfer within the firm to a financial advisory practice, right? And in this case, it was sort of infrastructure advisory. One of the reasons we went over there was I had a senior from my previous group that went over there, and he sort of, I guess, recruited me to the team, and then sitting down with all the team members and chatting about what the group actually does, I thought this is really really cool stuff, right? And we're dealing with very very tangible assets here compared to the banking world, where we dealt with very intangible things, right? And I thought that this would be a great place to sort of develop some core skill sets, right? Modeling, hardcore modeling, right? Not sort of just simple modeling, which I thought was like sort of a sort of invaluable skill moving forward.
Yeah, and I think back in my consulting days, I was doing greenfield modeling, where greenfield practically, like, I'm sure you're familiar with, Ian, was just nothing's there. Now the client wants to install solar panels, and so now we've been like, I remember the modeling got so nitty gritty where we'd go down to modeling out wind speed for wind turbines, solar radiation for throughout the day, timing it, and trying to forecast how much sun rays we're gonna get to run these solar panels.
Yeah, 100%. It's combining the real world to the finance world, right?
And so from there, I think some of my friends who've done infrastructure side, they end up from that advisory role is kind of like you're like an investment banker, and moving towards kind of, all right, let's go be like a buy side firm now, going to private equity. Now we're gonna straight up buy out these highways and solar panels. Did you think about that path?
No. So we weren't in the. So I personally wasn't in the investment side of the team. I was more on the I guess what we would call the development side of the team.
Okay.
Which is essentially looking at a country somewhere in the Caribbean wants to build a new hospital, right? Cool. Let's look at that, right? Like let's do the master planning for that. Does that make sense, right? How big should this hospital be? Where should it be located? How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? What sort of investors would we need, right? Equity investors, debt investors. What would the payback period be? What would the rate of return be for these individuals, right?
Right.
That sort of whole planning process is what I focused on.
Oh, okay. Was that a choice that you made?
Stumbled into it, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, our group did both. This is sort of where I started.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed my time there, so I stayed in that practice.
Okay. Yeah. And after that, now we have something. I think back when you told me about it, I was very surprised by it, but at the same time, I think it was really cool to hear where you said, all right, now I'm going to leave and I'm going to start a food startup company. And the company was called Chop Chop. I remember I definitely was participating in the beta when you launched it.
Right.
And for some of the people that don't know, how would you explain the business?
Right. Man, I haven't had to explain it for a long time. So
Probably not since your interview days, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think back then we called it dynamic pricing for restaurants.
Okay.
Right. Where the concept is really trying to get restaurants to deploy dynamic pricing to try to draw traffic during off-peak hours, right? So this is like pre-lunch or after lunch, pre-dinner, right? These are hours, in many sort of Western parts of the world, we have the concept called happy hour, right? In Canada, it's not as sort of big as in the States, where where they have a lot more prevalent happy hours. We were Well, yeah, we were essentially trying to just generate more traffic for restaurants, right? And using our app and technology to be able to help eaters find where these locations are and to really take advantage of some of these price cuts.
Yeah, no, that, and I think I really appreciated that app because for me, I eat at least like 6 times a day. I'll typically have 2 lunches, and so yeah, definitely hitting the happy hour times, finding what was available. That was honestly, I found it really helpful. So I think when I saw that disappear, it was a bit of a shame. But before, when you were taking me back to when you were actually at KPMG, you were still in infrastructure. How did this start? Like, how did this idea begin? Like, and what was the beginning process like to create this application?
Yeah, I think the process and the need for it really came from like a personal need and from a need from just many of my colleagues, right? I remember back in KPMG at lunch, I mean, at 11:55 or at noon, we would all say, "Hey, what do you want to eat today?" I don't know. What do you want to eat today, right? Like, I mean, we've tried everything in the food courts already, and there's really wasn't much sort of differentiation that like there was no really huge value prop to drive us one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in our heads, like, okay, if we knew that, let's say this restaurant had like a promo on Tuesday, we'd probably go there, right? And this other restaurant had a Wednesday promo, we'll probably go there, right? I mean, if you think about it, like Toonie Tuesdays work, right? Like, that's why they drive a lot of traffic through Toonie Tuesdays, right? Yeah. Promotions and price is a huge value proposition and really sort of drives consumer behavior. So we thought, okay, cool. What if like right now we don't know where all these promos are, right? Where these levers are being pulled. So what if we could sort of really get rid of that information asymmetry and give that information to the sort of masses, right? So that we can actually drive traffic left or right during that critical time of sort of what do I want to eat and where do I want to eat decision making.
Right. Yeah. And so you're an accountant and I'm an accountant, so I don't have any coding background. And from what I know, you're not a coder either. So how did you actually create the product? Getting it from first the idea, not the actual inception. Did you hire people outside or? Yeah,
no, we didn't hire it. Well, I mean, sorry, we brought on like co-founder. I brought on co-founders, right?
Oh, okay.
Crazy story how we found these individuals. One is so I was out in Boston visiting a friend. Yeah. Oh, a couple of friends actually. They're finishing up their PhDs. Well, they're twins, identical twins. One at PhD at MIT. The other one's finishing up his PhD at Harvard.
Of course.
Yeah, of course, right? So the crazy story is actually how I decided to go visit them. I was at the Pan Am Games here in Toronto, right?
Right. Yeah.
And there's a board like a Porter airplane board, right?
Right.
You throw a dart at the board,
Uh-huh.
and if you hit one of the cities, your name is put into sort of a draw, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, not that many people hit the city, so I hit it, and then I drew a free pair of tickets to anywhere that Porter flew.
Oh.
So, and then I mean Porter doesn't fly to that many places, right?
Yeah.
So I was looking at the map. Okay, cool. Where haven't I been before? Haven't been for a while, and like where do I have friends to go visit, right? So Boston was one of those places. So I said, hey, come over for a weekend, right? So I met up with them, caught up with them, and telling them about this idea at that time, and they said, "Oh, cool. We have a undergrad friend who's at Microsoft, and he I think just left Microsoft. Like he wants to do something. He's not really sure, and he's just kind of hanging out right now, right? I think let's connect the two of you guys and start chatting. So we got connected, and yeah, he was super pumped about this idea, and at that time he was in Vancouver, and he flew over to Toronto for like 6 months, like got rent for 6 months, and we just started building this thing. And one of our other co-founders, I was in this program called Founders Institute, which is sort of a mini like accelerator for startups.
Oh, okay.
And during that time, one of our other co-founders was working on a different startup, like a legal startup. But he heard about my idea and he really wanted to join, participate in this one. So the three of us became sort of the first, the co-founders.
Oh, okay. And so, you have your, tech person now. You have your other co-founder, and did you guys all apply to become part of the accelerator together with just the idea, or how was that process like?
Yeah. So I actually applied for myself through that program, and then Al, our other co-founder, also did it through his startup. So we joined together, but midway he wanted to switch over and wanted to hop on board.
Oh, okay. And did you need to present a kind of MVP for it, or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, application process. Yeah, you needed to like describe what you were working on and stuff.
Okay.
I think you had to at least have a couple ideas before. I believe, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's like a 12-week program, I believe, and every single week you work on a different sort of aspect of the startup. Let's say building the MVP, right? Market validation, and marketing, investing, all that sort of stuff. Like they just focus on it. It doesn't mean you need to like focus on you need to work on it during that week as well. But honestly, you don't need to finish it or anything like that, right?
Right.
And after that whole process, there's checkpoints in the middle where they would go through, I can't remember what they're called, but they would sort of review your project and review your presentation and pitch, and if you didn't pass for some reason, we were graded on various different sort of metrics, and if you didn't pass, then you would be asked to leave the program, and by like the end of the whole process, I think month 12 or so, you would graduate, and you'd be part of this cohort, and it's branded and everything, and you're part of this sort of community now, and there's a lot of help and support from people and graduates and the leaders of this program.
And so then, were you doing this while you were working, like you're doing it part-time?
No, so that I was done already.
Okay, yeah, left KPMG.
Yeah.
And so then, how did you have the conviction to make that leap where you're like, what, I'm gonna take that leap of faith and go into an accelerator program?
Yeah.
Get my team going?
Yeah, I think at that point I was thinking about I knew I wanted to sort of get into tech. I wanted to build things. I wanted to build a business for my own, and I knew that if you stayed at the firm, most of your hours during the day is working on work, right? Like real professional services work, consulting, advisory work, and cool. You might think that you have time to work at night on your side project or your startup or something like that. Sure, you might have a little bit of time, but realistically, by the time you get home, you're very tired. You kind of want to eat and rest up, right? And after a while of this, and I realized, hey, this is not possible, right? If I really want to do something, I gotta dive all in and really, really work on it. And in terms of the risk, sort of the decision to jumping into it, if you think about sort of my professional background at that time, right? I had a couple years in audit, left as a senior, a couple years in advisory. I was a manager at that time. If I had left the firm, went to pursue my own project, passion project, startup, whatever it may be, if it really failed and I needed a job, right? If I needed to put food on the table and needed a job, I could have probably came back, right, into my original position, right? Or I could have gone to another firm, get a very similar position at any of other big four consulting firms or something like that, right? It's very the services we offer are very similar, right, across all the firms. So the only downside of that time was actually just the loss in revenue, loss in income, right? Right, whatever that, whether it's 6 months, a year, or whatever it is, right? That is the only downside of that equation. Yeah. Right. The upside is, I evaluated the upside as huge at that time, right? I mean, a lot of sort of a lot of confidence on our own startup, obviously, but it failed, so it didn't materialize. But at that point, you evaluate the business as really, really strong, and that's what you needed to sell, right? And you had to believe it and embody it, right? When you pitch to investors and people like that, the upside was huge. And also, even if it failed, the upside was huge in terms of personal growth and personal learning, right? This is a time in my life where I could afford to invest time and money into that, right? Before you have a family, kids, and things like that, which at that time you have a lot more responsibilities, right? Where you need to make sure you bring in income and put food on the table.
Yeah.
Right now, I didn't really have that responsibility, and in terms of evaluating the risk profile at that point, it was a lot lower than fast forward, let's say, another 3 years or something like that.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you 100% in terms of like, even when I left audit to go into consulting, I remember I'd catch up with my audit mentors, and you know, they casually just throw out, you know, if consulting's boring, you can always come back.
Yeah.
We always need more people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was definitely a theme that is constantly reoccurring in our kind of profession. And yeah, I think the kind of, yeah, I think some people say like, oh, it's really risky to leave this kind of job and start a startup, but the way you put it, yeah, I think it's more, you have some downside, but it's never permanent. Like risk is you can't, I think, overcome it. Like there's a permanency to it, but it's more, yeah, I know you lose some income over like 6 months or a year, but you have such a higher upside where it's kind of like, you know, heads you win, tails you don't really lose too much.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good way to look at it. And the thing is that you have to look at your career from a, let's say 40 years? 40 years, I think it's appropriate sort of span to look at. Losing 6 months within that 40 years is nothing, right?
No. 100%.
And the upside of that investment, that 6 month investment, half a year, could potentially be massive.
Yeah, and so you know, you talked about how you had a lot of conviction for your startup, and you had all these high hopes for it. So how did the what was like your idea on like monetization? Like, did you hit sales? What was your goal to kind of hit sales like within like 6 months, or how was that whole kind of process like for you?
Yeah, so I think initially it was really just validation from eaters that we really needed, right, from customers. Restaurants, yeah, we went door by door talking to restaurants, and restaurants are all very sold on our sort of idea and the monetization sort of the structure that we were trying to sell at. All restaurants were pretty eager about that. They didn't really have a problem.
Really?
It was really the eaters, right? At the end of the day, if you think of the product, who is the main user of the product, and it's the eaters and the customers. We really needed to see traction from their end, right? Before we're able to do anything, right? So I think that's really where we thought we had found something that people wanted, but once you sort of test it with and we ran focus groups and all that sort of stuff, and everyone said, yeah, we want this, but like if I were to do this again, I think you'd really just start with real world people who you don't know and build the product and just see if they use it or not, right? Because people all like the idea of like getting promos and discounts and things like that, but sometimes, or many cases, convenience was just like the strongest factor, right? And you might think like, okay, cool, I want to get 50% off something, but that's slightly farther away from what's just downstairs. I'm just going to do the downstairs approach, right? Yeah, we just found that like through different use cases, right? Once you put it on the test market, you actually see how the marketplace reacts to this new tool, and the value proposition just wasn't strong enough. I think where we found some traction was with students in the Ryerson community, where students kind of use it a bit more. They're more price sensitive, right? But in the financial district, less so, right? I think we had a lot of like drink offers and stuff on our platform as well. We thought, okay, you know, people go for drinks after work, right? They want to find where the happy hours are. Turns out like, and we should have known this. Like, I mean, I worked for these companies. The firms sort of sponsor a lot of these happy hours and team drinks and things like that, right? They don't really care about where the discounts are and things like that. So they just sort of go to whatever's the closest, or whatever the atmosphere is the best, or what they're most. And then people are like, humans are creatures of habit as well, right? They like to go to their regular watering holes, right? Even if it's just at full price. So once you put it out in the market, you can actually see the use cases, and the use cases weren't that much. So that's where we really sort of struggled with finding that product market fit.
And you know, now you've been operating it for about 9 months, and there comes a point where, you know, I think a lot of people, there's like that sunk cost fallacy where, do I continue on with this, or do I kind of cut my losses short and move on? What was the determining factor when you and your team decided, hey guys, let's just cut it and go?
I think exactly. I think sunk cost is like how you need to look at this, right? Cool, the time you invested in it was time that's gone. You can't get it back, right? So I mean, you shouldn't look at the time you invested there in terms of money invested. Same thing. You should look at it as sunk cost. For us, we didn't invest too much, right? Because we had the skills and talent to actually build the app and the technology in house, right? Both Al and Glenn both could code, and they were the sort of architects of the product, and yeah, we didn't have to spend so much money on external like engineering firms or app developing agencies and things like that. So the cost was really just our time, right? We, in terms of the decision to cut your losses, is really to look at, okay, like at that point, what do you believe is the future value of this, right? What is the future expected value? And you could sort of reevaluate that every month by month, right? Some month, your expectation, the probability sort of increases because you see traction. Some months you sort of see the probability decrease because a loss of traction, for example, let's say retention is not great, churn is high, right? Yeah. So there's always this dial, right? And you just got to keep on sort of having a pulse on this dial. And where the probability dial goes really, really low, then I mean, like, reevaluate, like, if you knew this at the time and when you started, would you have gone all in, right? And if no, then you should be at the same position, right? Because there's infinite problems that you can pursue and like interesting challenges and new startups ideas out there, right? If this compared to your next best alternative is not as the value, the probability of success and the expected value of like the expected value of success is lower than your next best alternative, then I think that you can try to think about like doing something else.
And so then, did you have that ahead of time set where you kind of had a benchmark where, you know, if retention rates hit at least this amount for like a prolonged period of time, I think we're done? Or
no, we didn't have that set because, I mean, going into it, we don't know what the market retention rate is supposed to be, right? Like, what is the retention rate or the churn rate of a product like this? We didn't know that, right? You kind of just gotta do it and then see what the rates are, and then do you believe, like, because with churn rates and retention rates, you can kind of quickly see, right? If you're getting 10 people and you're losing 8 of them the next month, you only got 2 in the long run, right? And is 2 in the long run, like, especially, and you look at frequency of transaction, revenue per transaction, and project it out, man, like, this is not going to be a big business in the future, then, like, why bother, right? If your churn is only 1 person out of 10, then you got 9 people, and you do the math, does it make more sense? If it makes sense, keep going.
And so, you know, now you're kind of at the point where you're at the fork in the road where, okay, I have to decide what are the opportunities you're going to weigh these options against as like the opportunity costs. What was going on in your mind at that point?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, so it's looking at other opportunities, right?
Yeah.
At that point, you know, explore lots of different potential jobs or school or like MBA and things like that, right? And I mean, it's sort of a blanket approach, right? You kind of like let's test all of them, right? Like apply to different things, right? And then you see what comes back, and then what type of offers you have, and then you can evaluate your next best option, right?
And so then, you know, now you're at UberEats, and you know, there's definitely that tie with UberEats and what you're doing at Chop Chop. They're both in the food industry.
Yeah.
Did you want to stay in the food industry? Like, is that some big interest of yours?
I think Uber is really where I wanted to be. You know, massive growth story here, right? Big tech, like I really wanted to, like, from talking to people at Uber, I understood that it's a big company but had a small company feel, right? And the Toronto business sort of, well, there was a Toronto office, first of all, right? Like an office here that had a lot of people and could really sort of have the autonomy to run the business. So one of my very close friends, I spoke to her about this opportunity, and she really sold me on it. So I was really pumped about that. In terms of Eats specifically, I think that my background, if you think about it, rewinding back a little bit, it's infrastructure advisory, right? Did a lot of transportation related work as well in that field. And then if you think about my experience working with restaurants in the food tech space, right? Food tech plus transportation. That's pretty much like Uber plus eats, right?
Mhm,
So pretty natural fit.
Yeah.
From that perspective.
It's like a puzzle fitting right there. Like,
Yeah.
it's as if you planned it all out.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like now now you're at UberEats, and before you were an operations logistics manager, and now you're the market lead for Vancouver. So congrats on that promotion.
No, I still an operations manager, just like sort
Okay.
of different focus. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of then like what you do on a day-to-day basis, like if you were to take me through what the life is like in big tech, can you walk me through your day yesterday? Like take me through like the time you woke up, the time you got into the office, and you don't have to share the details that are not allowed to be shared, but just take me through what is like the full day from the time you woke up to the time you go to bed of what it's like to be an ops manager.
I mean, the waking up and the going to bed part is pretty normal with any company. I think standard working hours, right? Like once you get to the office, I think it's just checking emails, checking some dashes and metrics to make sure that the business is doing okay. Tons of meetings, always a lot of meetings. There's different projects that we're working on to move the business forward. So like syncing with different sort of internal business partners, like external stakeholders on various projects that we're working on. It's a very very collaborative process and a team that we have here. So we love jamming on projects and talking about strategy and building execution plans together, which is great. I think that that sort of brings the best out of all of us, sort of healthy debates and really coming with the best solution in terms of moving forward. Mornings meetings, and then lunch. Lunch is great. We have catered lunches here, and so that's true about big tech. We have the snacks and the lunch at the ping pong table, right? That's definitely part of it. I didn't play ping pong yesterday. That was not part of the day. And in the afternoon, again, just more meetings, more sync ups, and we have a couple interns with us this summer, so sessions with them, mentoring, coaching, and in the afternoon we actually had a team social where the whole office, we went into a Jays game, which is a lot of fun. Yeah.
Nice. And so then when back in my buy side days, when we look at companies, we like to look at the segment. Like for example, if Coca-Cola has multiple revenue income segments for their business, right? Like they'll earn X amount on beverages, X amount on like tea, for example. If we put that segmentation to your job and use like the percentage of time you would allocate to different activities, how would you segmentize it?
I would say, like, if you just look at like sort of categories of what I do, I think probably pretty evenly, sort of third across the spectrum of like planning, strategy, planning, that kind of work, right? A third being sort of executing, right? Like sending emails, building the models and dashes and things like that. And then a third being sort of inbound stuff, right? There's our business is live, right? We have people, partners, we have restaurants and eaters out in the marketplace, right? It's a live marketplace, so we need to deal with inbounds as they come in, right? So you don't know any given day. There's sort of tons of potential things that sort of come in and we've got to deal with. So a third across those spectrums, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you talked about how, like for example, yesterday you had a lot of different meetings, and so even when you split these things out to a third, like strategy and planning, for example, is that all mostly in meeting sessions where you are generally most of the time in a group setting and you're working things out together, or are you kind of sitting down by yourself and figuring things out, one presentation, and then go back to doing it by yourself?
Yeah, it's usually in a group environment.
Okay.
We just have so many internal and external stakeholders, right? We want to make sure that all the right voices are at the table to make sure that we have all our bases covered, all the considerations are sort of at the table, and that we can consider them and deal with them and address them as appropriate, because we don't want to solve problems in silos, right? Because there's a lot of potential for holes that way.
And then when you're at these kind of meetings, how does the decision making process work? Is it full democracy or?
No, I mean there's different ways, right? Like I mean, there's I don't think democracy is the right way to put it. Like people are there to put their input into problems, right? To voice inputs and we have healthy debates, but I don't. It's not. There's no voting process, right? It's just very like there's project owners, right? And we just make sure that we're gonna balance everybody's thoughts and considerations and come up with a decision after that.
Okay, and let's say you have your strategy session, and then you guys decide to take one approach in a project together. Then do you split up the duties and you go back and now you personally execute on them, or would you delegate it out to some other people?
Yeah, a combination of both. I think I own a lot of the execution pieces of it.
Okay.
And there's definitely other people on the project team that we have sort of delegated duties. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think when we think back to, for example, our Big Four days.
Mm-hmm.
The term when people say, "Oh, you're a manager," they generally have seniors and staffs and a bunch of people that they'll delegate stuff off to.
Right.
For you here, you have the title of manager. Would you say that you end up actually doing a lot of the work itself?
Oh, 100%. I think that here, first of all, like all our teams across whatever level your title has, right? Everyone sort of really leans in and pitches in to help us move the business forward. We have a very flat hierarchy system here. Across all levels, people really put in the effort to execute on projects as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then, if you were to give me a rating of the amount of autonomy you feel that you have over what you do, how you schedule your day, for example, in the rating scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a results-only work environment where the entire team's remote, doesn't matter where you are, you have to focus on the results. 1 being good old like investment banking, you gotta sit there until 4 p.m. when your work actually begins and you start working then.
Right.
Where would you rank your autonomy? And you can't pick 7.
Yeah. So which 1 is what? 10 is what?
So 10 is complete
autonomy.
Yeah, autonomy. And 1 is like close to
I
none.
think in my current capacity, I mean, this obviously differs across like your role and your responsibilities. In my current capacity, I would say I would be at like a 9.5. Yeah.
Nice. And so far, as you've worked here for I think just past a year now,
right?
Yeah,
just past a year.
Yeah, congrats on that. But yeah, like given what you've learned in the whole kind of eats industry as you go by, what are some things that you noticed while you're working here that you never noticed from like the outside, even when you were like a customer, even when you were at Chop Chop, like was something where you like, oh, I didn't know this was a big issue in the industry, like this kind of inefficiency existed.
Right. I don't think it's like inefficiencies. I think it's just observations. Like, I mean, I think any company, right?
Yeah.
For that matter, like what you see it from inside or you see it from outside is very different, right? For Uber Eats particularly, I think that look, you have to remember that we're like we have a real marketplace out in the world, right? We connect people, right? And these individuals are in the real world. And there's real life transactions and interactions happening, right? So there's tons of things that can just pop up and occur through these interactions, right? Unlike some other big tech companies, if you think about it, like let's say Google, right? When you do a search, you do a Google search, cool. Like that's between you and the computer and their servers, right? It's like that's sort of the extent of the interaction, right? And then, well, obviously you can click through images and maps and stuff like that, right? But like that's kind of like the interface and the environment you're dealing with, right?
Right.
From Facebook perspective, right? Again, like big tech, right? You can connect, you can talk to people, right? There's all within this like platform, right? And there's no like actual people physically engaging or interacting with people. I mean, like in the real life, like like physically beside each other, right? Yeah. So, like, sure, on Facebook Messenger, I can message you, we're interacting, but we're not beside each other, right? Versus in the Uber and Uber Eats world, right? There's people moving around in the physical space, right? And there's tons of these sort of things that can pop up, right? And very, very interesting problems that we have a team here to sort of tackle and solve, right? So I think that's sort of one of the biggest difference, right? You gotta make sure, cool, we're using an app, but like there's actually physical people interacting with each other.
Yeah, I remember like when we were having a phone chat one time. I think we might have met in person, but you were telling me about how we had like a snowstorm in Toronto, and given we're in Canada, that's going to be quite frequent. And you're saying how you had to be like all hands on deck for that because it was impacting delivery routes and stuff. And I just never thought about that.
I think that's a key example, right? Like, I mean, when snow falls on the ground, right?
Yeah.
That impacts the real physical world. And then we have, again, partners out in the real world engaging sort of with our business, right? Like, those are things that we need to sort of tackle and deal with, right? So,
And so how would you tackle it? If you were to do that kind of example?
How would I what?
How would you tackle that kind of problem? Do you guys all kind of start calling individual partners or telling people what to do? Do you send out like a news announcement? Like what goes on?
I mean, so there's definitely tons of different type of levers that we can pull, and different sort of strategies and methods that we can engage with. The specifics I'll leave out of the conversation here.
Right.
But yeah, like there's, I mean, at the end of the day, if you think about what the problem is, the demand and supply problems, right? So how do we sort of pull levers to make sure demand and supply are balanced, and to bring that back to equilibrium, where in the real world it's sort of an acceptable sort of level of equilibrium, right? Because again, these are all things that impact people in the real world. So prices and physical proximity, speed, all of these things are sort of impacted as soon as snow falls, so we would need to sort of rebalance that.
Okay, and for you then, is that a lot of just communicating with vendors and things like that, or is it
that's definitely
models
that. Yeah, tons of stuff we can do there. I mean, we are a three-sided marketplace, right? So we eaters are our customers, our driver partners, delivery partners are our customers, and restaurant partners are also our customers, right? So we need to interact with all three sides to make sure we can get something to work.
Okay, and so now I'm a customer of UberEats. Like I use you guys quite frequently, but I find sometimes when I use UberEats, drivers will deliver the food, and so they can't park at my location, so they can't deliver it up to my place. Is that something you guys are working on to work on as a problem?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So parking is definitely sort of again, real world problem, right?
Yeah.
People try to find parking as needed with different traffic laws, different traffic rules across all our markets around the world, right? Like you have to think that we have so many different variations of rules and sort of like the size of cars, right? Some of the markets we have like motorbikes, right?
Right.
Some places have bicycles, right? So
Right.
bicycles parking is not that big of a deal, right? Not that big of a challenge, right? So yeah, we're working across all of those platforms to make sure that we can get our eaters the best experience as possible.
All right. Okay. I'll hope for more updates on that then, and having more potentially bicycle people delivering my stuff. But yeah, and so then given you've taken, I would say, quite a unique kind of career path. You started out in audit, and the typical path is someone just becomes like a controller and stays there till they die. But you've traversed and found somewhere that you've definitely found yourself to be like enjoying. But I think it goes without saying that there are times when shit gets real, shit gets really scary. And for you, what has been the moment where it just seems super challenging and made you kind of doubt the kind of decisions you might have made, and you're just kind of scared shit?
Right. So I mean, not, if you work in a corporate environment, and like even within the company I work in now, like I don't think things really get you out of control. Like I think things are pretty okay. I think it's really when you work in your own startup. So when I worked when I worked as Chop Chop, right? I think that's really where it can be pretty stressful, right? Because you're running your own business with three partners. No one's earning an income or salary, right? That's when there's a lot more stress and pressure, right? So, sorry, your question was how do we deal with this, or
like just kind of a specific moment that you had that you remember as being like, that was a time when it was extremely challenging, and you were just.
I think things are challenging, but I don't think I was ever like freaking out about anything. Like you go into these things with expectations of the outcomes, right? Like you calculate the expected value of the outcome, low probability, high potential monetary value or whatever, right? Cool, but you go in knowing that the probability of success is super, super low, right? If you are properly primed and properly set your own expectations, then I don't think like it's a surprise 6 months later if the business isn't working out that well, right? Like you try to do everything in your capacity and power to try to make it a success, right? Follow the playbook. You build out these things, right? You read a lot. You talk to a lot of industry players. You do a lot of market research. You talk to a lot of customers, and you work very, very hard, many hours in the day, right? But like that's sort of the input that you got to put in, right? But then afterwards, like what I'm saying is that you can't just blindly go in thinking, oh, this is it. I'm gonna kill it. This is it. This company is gonna be like super successful for sure, right? So knowing the expectations going in, I mean, never really got that crazy or never that serious. I think all of the co-founders were all very reasonable people who went in with the same attitude and same mindset, but we evaluated and reevaluated at every checkpoint and milestone. So we're all like kind of abreast of what's happening in the situation and in the business, right? So no particularly oh my goodness, this isn't the world sort of situations.
Right. Yeah, and I think though I think sometimes I think the kind of approach that you have is not as common. I think a lot of people, there's definitely cases where people are in the extremes of this is gonna work, just gotta push harder at it, it's gonna work, or it's just never gonna work, I'm too afraid, I'm just not gonna do anything. And so for you, like, is there something that you believe personally that you think kind of goes against what the conventional wisdom might believe, and it's kind of been helpful for you in terms of guiding what you chose to do and your decision making?
Right. Against conventional wisdom, I think it's just more. I mean, I think, like, for example, if you think about like people's career pathing and things like that, right? You go into sort of you go to university, you study a field, you go into that. You try to get a job in that undergrad field, right, or master's here or whatever. Build some competencies and proficiencies there, and then within our within this generation, I think people sort of look at 2-3 years as sort of a timeline to get experience here, and then jump to the next role and the next role, right? Preferably up, I guess, right? And you try to stick with these sort of safe environments that like you can just sort of climb the corporate ladder, right? I feel like if that is what convention is, I feel that that might not be the best approach, right? I think within that, especially earlier on in lifestyle, I think we talked about this earlier in this session, is that like, hey, take some risks, right? Like you're young, you can probably afford like half a year off doing something pretty crazy, right? The result of that something crazy could be pretty really good in terms of like a financial success, or it can just be super valuable from a self-growth learning, right? Like, I mean, some people, you don't need to start a business to start a startup, right? Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but you can go do the whole travel thing, right? To get just broaden your like sort of horizon and lens, and just be more just gain more knowledge and experience through different things, right? So like take risks earlier on, right? And you don't need to just climb every 2 years, climb a rung up the ladder, right? You can even climb horizontally. I think that's another thing that people are scared of, right? They don't want to move horizontally. I think there's nothing wrong with horizontal, because getting that breadth of experience and aggregating the skill set, it's all about experiences, right? Aggregating skill sets and experiences from a breadth of field. Once you sum all of that, like, I mean, in finance, you have like the sum of all parts, right?
Right.
Sum all that together, you're gonna go way higher than where someone could have just climbed slowly, rung by rung. Right?
And so for you, do you think your risk appetite has decreased than before, given your current position, or do you still think that you still have that kind of a high risk tolerance with you?
Yeah, I think I think the risk tolerance is still the same. Like, I mean, maybe in a couple of years, probably it might decrease, right? I think a lot of it comes with family situations, right? Like, I think having children in your life is sort of one of the biggest factors of that, right? So right now, I think the risk profile is still the same, but really. It's more sort of like taking those risks within the company now, right? Really enjoying what I do here, and I think there's tons of opportunities here to grow.
And if you were to think back, and if you were to imagine your 20-year-old self, like thinking young Ian, like third year university, if he were to see where you are at now, what do you think his reaction would be? Do you think it'd be surprise? It's like completely different from what you'd expect it to be at your current age, or?
Not really, honestly.
Yeah?
I think it's probably pretty much exactly where, where I thought I would sort of end up. I think step one was professional services, right?
Right.
And it can be sort of, like accounting, financial advisory, consulting, banking, right? Something sort of to develop structure and build those competencies, right?
Right.
That we really need, that structural thinking that comes with like client service, right? And then from then on, it's like, it's to build and grow a business, right? I think that's what I've always wanted to do. I mean, obviously I would be at Uber, right, per se, but some sort of company growing, whether it's my own, right, or a smaller startup, medium-sized startup, large startup, or even a corporate, like a mega corporate company. I think this is pretty much exactly where I thought I'd be. Yeah.
No, that's kind of a Nostradamus of your own future.
Well, I mean, it's just I mean, who knows exactly? Like thinking now, that's what I thought, but like back then, I think it's very difficult to predict where you want to be, but like you can definitely sort of make conscious decisions, like plan like 5 years out. I know these days 5 years is a long time, but plan 5 years out and kind of think about where you want to be and like make conscious efforts of like try to get yourself there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think even making that having that thought process of where you actually want to end up in like 5 or 10 years actually inherently helps you make certain decisions that will guide you into that area.
Yeah, for sure.
And so then for you as like parting advice, if you were to give advice to 20-year-olds, could have been at the end of third year or other 20-year-olds, what kind of advice would you give?
I think it's just finish the program, start off somewhere where you can build some competencies, right? I feel that coming out of university, like we have the knowledge, but we don't have the practical experience, right? Starting at large companies really gives us the structure. Like large companies have programs and processes in place to make sure that we do things by the book, right? And by the structure that they've set out. And that structure is super helpful, right? That's why they became big companies, because they had a good process and structure of doing things, right? So build your competencies there, and then just don't be afraid to take risks after that, right? Like know your be confident in what you can and can't do, take the most appropriate risks, and those risks usually lead to something pretty awesome.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Ian. Thanks a lot for your time, and I really do hope the audience appreciates the wise words of wisdom that you shared with us today.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Daniel.
No problem. So thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please check out other episodes, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date for the future episodes. Also, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, whichever is applicable to you. To see past episodes, you can go to oldmandan.com/podcasts. Also, you can sign up to my weekly newsletter on my blog, oldmandan.com/newsletter. You can stay up to date with future podcast episodes that way, and included in the newsletter are my book reviews I write, my weekly article related to the domain of self-development systems, as well as 7 things I learned throughout the week on being healthy, wealthy, and wise. Finally, special thanks to icons8.com for allowing me to use their music Tiny People on the podcast. Great. I will see you all next time. Take care.